Freeze, asshole. Super Special Agent James Reeves, you're under arrest for not watching enough TFBTV. But you know what? Maybe we can work something out right now, because today on TFBTV, we're talking about the best handgun ever tested by the FBI. I mean, at least in the 80s. Think back to 1987, I guess, if you were alive back then and not a baby. The top song was Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bengals. The first episode of The Simpsons aired on TV, and Ronald Reagan told Mr. Gorbachev to take down this wall. And that same year, the FBI carried out grueling testing of 9 different handguns to see which was the most reliable and accurate. I got my hands on a copy of this report. I'm going to summarize it and review the results with you today on TFBTV, the FBI handgun test. Apparently back in the 80s, YouTube didn't exist yet, and therefore there were no internet experts to consult when choosing a handgun. Accordingly, the FBI received frequent requests from local law enforcement agencies seeking advice on selecting a sidearm. The Bureau decided that what they would do is take a bunch of hotshot agents, get an FBI gunsmith, take them all out to the range with 17,000 rounds of ammo and 9 different pistols to test accuracy, reliability, durability. The Bureau also made recommendations to these departments based on other factors such as reputation of the manufacturer, the ease of obtaining parts for the guns, getting aftermarket support, and the cost per unit for the guns. Often these tests get bogged down purely in performance, but the FBI also wanted to give cash-strapped departments other considerations to look at when making their sidearm pick. So let's talk about the contestants. There were 9 guns, but really it was like 6 guns. You got the Glock 17, Glock 19. Basically the same gun. The 19's just the compact version of the 17. You have the 226 and the SIG P220, both from Sig Sauer. The same gun, but the 226 is a 9mm, the 220 is 45 ACP. You had the Smith & Wesson 645 and 45 ACP and the 459 and 9mm. Again, basically the same gun. In addition to those 3 guns, you also had the Beretta 92 and the Ruger P85, both great pistols. In addition to those heavy hitters, there was a dark horse in the mix, a little-known pistol called the ITM AT-84. At least that's what I think it was, because the FBI report repeatedly lists the AT-84 as being made by IMI, or Israeli Military Industries. I don't think IMI ever made an IT-84, so this was probably a typo, a mistaken reference to ITM. I could be wrong, but I mean, certainly if we're looking at a bureaucratic government agency versus a private expert, I would absolutely trust the federal government. Right, guys? I guess it's a moot point anyways, because the FBI said that the test required the ability to decock the gun without pulling the trigger, and because this high-end Swiss CZ75 could not do that, it was rejected. I don't know how it got rejected and the Glocks didn't, because they don't have a decocker either, but like I said, just trust the FBI, okay? And it's funny to me that there were only 2 45 ACPs in this test. The FBI in this report would not shut the up about how great 45 ACP was and how all the agents agreed it was a better round than 9mm. Of course, 45 has since fallen out of vogue with advances in 9mm performance, with the FBI itself switching back to 9mm. There's an interesting minor note in this about the 1987 report, which states that the new 147 grain 9mm subsonic performs just as well as, at the time, 45 ACP. But apparently there was such a huge dick measuring contest among the agents testing these guns, 9mm versus 45 ACP, that they actually had to start a quote-unquote workshop to make an addendum report discussing 9mm versus 45 ACP. So if you thought it was only YouTubers and internet bulletin board commandos who fought over calibers, apparently back in the 80s it was so hotly contested among the FBI that it literally prevented them from doing their jobs. But now the stage was set for an epic 80s showdown. The FBI tested accuracy, reliability, and durability. Let's talk about durability first, because this is a quick one. As you can imagine, all of these pistols are pretty durable, so all of them but one got a perfect durability score. All of the guns were dropped 3 times from 3 feet, which actually sounds a little wimpy to me, but whatever. If you drop a gun in real life, it's probably going to be from at least 3 feet to probably 6 feet from the ground, depending on how tall you are or where you're dropping it from. So all of them passed this test. The next test is the infamous Frisbee test. The guns were thrown Frisbee style 15 feet, once on each side. Now we're talking. All of them passed this too, surprisingly. Finally, and kind of random, but they bashed the trigger guards with a mallet. All of the guns passed this test except for the SIGs. The mallet strikes caused the trigger guards on the SIGs to actually bend into the trigger, functionally destroying the guns, rendering them totally inoperable because you couldn't pull the trigger back. I'm sure there's a reason why they implemented this unusual test. If you know or you want to take a guess, I guess let me know in the comments. So for durability, FBI is saying they're all about the same. Let's look at reliability. The 3 most reliable guns in the test were the S&W 459, which averaged 500 rounds between stoppages, the SIG P226, which averaged 600 rounds between malfunctions, and the Beretta 92, which averaged nearly 1,200 rounds without stoppages. This is unsurprising because in the military's XM9 tests just 3 years before, these were the 3 most reliable handguns in that test, with over 3,500 mean rounds between stoppages each. But looking at the FBI test, 3 guns got perfect scores, 25 out of 25. The SIG P226, the Beretta 92, and the S&W 645. The 645 only averaged 300 mean rounds between stoppages. The 459 was almost twice as reliable as the 645, but the Smith 645 got a higher score because the 459 lost its rear sight during the test. At the same time, the 645 got a perfect score even though the safety lever kept coming loose during the trials. To give the 645 the same score as the P226, which was twice as reliable, or the Beretta 92, which was 4 times as reliable, absolutely shows a bias towards the 45. And unfortunately, the other 45 in the test, the SIG P220, suffered from numerous mag-related failures, so it averaged 1 failure every 4 boxes of ammo. Oof. The Glock 19 and Glock 17 had a staggering 1 failure every 50 to 60 rounds. I would just as soon believe that you saw Hickok 45 kick flipping down the street in a do-rag with a massive blunt dangling from his mouth as I'd believe that any Glock ever would have 1 malfunction in every box of ammo. However, it makes more sense when you read the footnotes of the report. The notes say that they counted a failure of the slide to lock back after the last round the same as a failure to feed to extract, and they said the Glocks often failed to lock open after the last round was fired in the magazine. There was no mention whatsoever of actual failures of the Glock to chamber a round, just the slide failing to lock back, which could just as easily be caused by the shooter's grip. In other words, it's hard to tell from these numbers if the Glock had any real issues with cycling, which I would say is more significant, or if you just had these 45 caliber loving mouth breather FBI agents riding the slide stop and then blaming the gun for it. There's also a note about the Glocks leaving light primer strikes in unspent rounds. I'm just saying, chamber a round in your AR-15, look at the primer on that round, and tell me if that's ever been a problem for you. So clearly, this was just Glock character assassination by the FUD Bureau of Instigation. In last place, one of the 2 test Ruger P85s died after fewer than 500 rounds, and the other P85 died after only 1,300 rounds. This probably explains why there are maybe 2 police departments, a handful of target security guards, and the Iraqi army that have ever used the Ruger P series as a duty gun. Finally, the accuracy tests. The FBI tested combat accuracy and made an effort at testing mechanical accuracy. So for mechanical accuracy, what do? The agents shoot from a seated position at a target 50 yards away, and when they realized this didn't really mean shit, they gave all the guns a perfect score for having good enough accuracy at this range. 1987 FBI thought it was a good idea, but I wonder what 2022 FBI would think about shooting at a perp 50 yards away with a handgun while sitting down. The FBI then engaged in 3 drills for combat accuracy: a 2x2 drill, a 5x5 drill, and the big one, the formal FBI qualification course. For the 2x2 drill, they shot 2 controlled pairs. The main purpose of doing this was to see if the Glocks gave agents an unfair advantage. Specifically, Glocks are striker-fired handguns. They don't have hammers. All the rest of the guns are hammer-fired guns that have a first trigger pull out of the holster that's going to be a heavier double-action pull. That is, the trigger pull will both cock and release the hammer. while all the follow-up shots, because the gun has racked itself, right, those trigger pulls are simply releasing the hammer, and therefore they have much lighter trigger weight. The thought process is that the Glocks would have the same 5 or 6 pound trigger pull with every shot, while all the hammer-fired guns in the test would have a disadvantage with a heavy 10 to 15 pound first trigger pull, and then a 3 to 6 pound trigger pull on all of the follow-up shots. Now, it's unclear how this was scored, whether it was on accuracy or time or both, but 88 points was the maximum. The results also kind of don't make sense, and this isn't me just bitching because Glock didn't win. The Smith & Wessons got a 74 and a 76, okay. The SIGs, same guns basically, got a 72 and a 68, all right. The instructors made a note that SIG sights were bad, and this is probably back in the day when they were still using these Von Stavenhagen sights. What puzzles me is how the Beretta 92, which I love to death, but it does have an awful double action trigger pull, it got the same score of 66 as the Glock 19, but what's even weirder is that the Glock 17, which as a larger gun than the 19, should certainly outperform the 19, but it got a lowly 60-point score. So the two SIGs and the two S&Ws, their scores were close, but they should have pretty much identical scores because each pair is basically the same gun. So why then did the two Glocks get split by the 92? And just because I'm not surprised doesn't mean I'm not sad that the P85 got the lowest score of 56 out of 88. Great gun, not going to win any matches with it. The next test was a 5x5. That's to say the shooter got 2 magazines, 5 rounds each. They would shoot the first one dry, they would load the second one and shoot it dry too. This is actually a fantastic little drill for evaluating a handgun because it tests all of the major components, all of the major functions of the gun in order. The slide lock to make sure that the gun locks open on the last round, the magazine release to make sure you can easily eject an empty magazine, the magazine well and magazine seating when you reinsert a mag, and then the slide release to drop the slide on a fresh magazine. Great little test. The SIGs both got an 81 out of 88. I think the 220 and the 226 still have virtually perfect controls to this day, so I'm completely unsurprised by this. Both of the Smith & Wessons got about the same score, roughly 76 points. This makes sense because they're well-designed pistols as well with good ergos for their time, and they're pretty similar. The Beretta 92 got a 69, nice. And again, with the bizarro Glock scores, where the Glock 17 this time has a higher score of 63, and the 19 is lower with a 59. Not only did they switch positions, but they're 4 points apart when all of the controls are in the exact same place. They're all the exact same. The dimensions for purposes of this test are identical. Hell, there are dimensional and weight differences between the Smith & Wessons and the SIGs, so it would make more sense if like the 220 and the 226 had disparate scores, but not the Glocks because their controls, magwell, everything, they're identically configured and in the same caliber, so how are their scores that different?
We're out here at Thunder Ranch. We decided to do our own FBI test, so I bought 5 of the guns that were used in that test, including the Beretta 92. Now, of course, this is the LTT model, but it's got the standard trigger. That's important. We've also got a Smith & Wesson 6906. Not the same Smith & Wessons that they used in the test, but again, close enough. We also, Ruger P89, turns out. I've actually had this one for a while, love this gun. This is pretty close to the P85 that the FBI used in their testing. Then, SIG P226, this one's made in 1988. It's a JJ date code. This is going to be virtually exactly like what was used by the FBI in their tests. And then finally, of course, Glock 17, although this one is a Gen 3 Glock 17. Most likely they would have been using a Gen 1 or a Gen 2 for those tests. We got a few shooters out here. We're going to line up at 7 yards, shoot into an A-zone target, and we're going to ask everybody how they felt about their runs whenever they're done. James Reeves ranking, I would say these were actually all pretty good. These were all actually pretty good. I was surprised. I thought the Ruger and the Smith were going to be shittier. I guess we'll say Glock, Beretta, SIG, which I love the 226. All 3 of those are great guns. That's so hard. And you know, I guess I like the Smith better than the Ruger, but I like all these guns, and I felt like I shot them all pretty well. Guys, my good friend Johnny B. Stay on the ground! rank them for me 1 to 5 and give me a couple comments.
Number 1, the Smith & Wesson. I just thought it was just smooth, and overall it feels good because it's metal, and I like metal guns. Number 2, the Beretta. I know, but I just like that trigger on the reset. Number 3, the Ruger. It's big. Beat the bad guy with it. Number 4, the SIG. It just felt like a big piece of machinery, German machinery in my hands. And number 5 is the Glock. Feels like a Glock.
So I tried to go in with an open mind, considering I've got a lot more trigger time with some of these. Right off the bat, the Smith & Wesson, I did have issues with it. It wouldn't, the mag wouldn't drop free, and I actually cut myself on it. So I would say that's probably the worst, even though I did shoot a tight group. Ruger'd be next. Probably the SIG in 3rd place. The Beretta ran really smooth for me, so I'd give that 2nd place. And just my speed and accuracy with a Glock, I'd have to say number 1.
Good shooting. Good time. Dude, that was, I told you that was probably your best one.
Graham Bates of GB Guns shoot a lot of pistols, and of these, the best hand fit, shockingly, was Glock. Top for me, Glock, of course, was simple. The Beretta, and it may be that I have a background with it. Then the SIG, and then Ruger Smith are kind of tied for last. There's no 4th place in that one.
Yeah.
But all's well that ends well, my friends. The final course was the FBI's famed PQC, or Pistol Qualifying Course, which was at the time shot with 50 rounds from distances of 7 to 25 yards away. I'll put the course of fire on screen instead of going over it one by one. It's a little long, but it's thorough. A perfect score is 100 points. Surprisingly, the SIG 220 finished dead last with a respectable score of 84.5. Again, a score of 80 passes, so this is still pretty good performance. The Glock 19 barely beat the 220 with an 85.7. The lowly Ruger P85, in a valiant last effort before it died at the end of the PQC, beat them both with an 88.6. The Smith 645 was next with an 89.1, meaning that no .45 caliber finished with above a 90 score. The 226 shot 7 points better than the identical P220, the strong 91.5 score, proving the point that out of the same gun, 9mm will just shoot better than .45. The 459 got a great 92.4 score, beating its .45 caliber brethren by 3 points. One of the best 9mm of all time scored an amazing 92.5, meaning the Beretta 92 edged out the 459 by just 1/10 of a point. Now, by deduction, you've realized that the king of Wonder 9s, the Glock 17, averaged a score of 94 out of 100 among 13 qualified FBI shooters, with the highest score of all the guns on the PQC. You can come up with all these arbitrary tests, but when it gets down to it, you can't beat the bank, bitch. And although the Glock 17 beat them all in the one test that doesn't lie, the one test that's based on objective scoring, the one test that can't be misconstrued by the .45 caliber apologists, in the overall rankings, the Glock 17 and 19 were just in front of the P85, the last place gun. The FBI rated all of the guns out of 750 points, taking all factors into consideration. With a sad score of 575, the P85 didn't even show up to the award ceremony. It took a cab to the nearest Tutors, crushed a pitcher of beer or two and a basket of wings, and took an earlier flight home on Eastern Airlines. Here's the half-page list of complaints the FBI had about one of my most favorite guns in the world, the P85, in case you want to read them. To be fair, it did get a perfect score for parts availability, reputation of the manufacturer, and delivery time. Sure, warranty service and prompt shipping doesn't win gunfights, but it does help bureaucrats keep jobs, so arguably, it could be more important. The Glocks took huge point hits for being unreliable and unsafe, aka the slide stop not working, probably because of the obese sausage thumbs on these bozo FBI agents. They took a huge score hit for being unsafe because apparently more than one FBI agent desk popped their first round. Seriously. Again, this is back in the day when everyone was used to heavy double action first trigger pulls and revolvers, so agents were probably staging their triggers, NDing, and then blaming God's plastic instead of themselves. Oh, and they also lost 5 points, Glock did, because agents said that the Glock takedown lever was too small. Are you f***ing kidding me? In spite of performing very well, the Beretta 92 actually scored in the middle of the pack. All of the foreign manufacturers, Beretta, Glock, and SIG, were each kneecapped 15 points for parts availability because the FBI said in their experience, it's harder to get parts from foreign manufacturers generally. The remaining complaints about the 92 were funny because some of them were true. Like it has a small front sight and a terrible double action trigger pull and the grips are too thick, while other complaints were just silly, like the exposed barrel burned one of the agent's hand once. This test, guys, I gotta tell you, it's too much. Now the 220 and the 226 performed well, but apparently the 220 fired when dropped, which is like deja vu, huh, Sig? They also failed to bash the shit out of the trigger guard with a hammer part of the test, which, like, what is that? But the 226 still came in second place with a 710 out of 750. Not bad. The 459 got a 705 right behind the 226, but it lost points after the rear sight fell off during the test. And curiously, the FBI said that after 5 years, the 459 alloy frames would start to crack and they needed complete replacement. And like that, one of the most average performers in this test was named the champion. You know what? Congratulations. Congratulations to the 645. Congratulations to the FBI for running one of the most American tests I've ever seen. I'm not even mad about it. In fact, I'm positive that this is a reptiloid plot. There were fewer twists in the JFK assassination than this pistol test, and no one even dared question the results of this grassy knoll of a pistol trial. But like I said, gang, all's well that ends well. As myself, James Reeves, I personally got to gaze upon with these eyeballs, swear to God, the original typewritten letter still in Gaston Glock's personal office that memorializes the FBI formally adopting his pistol 10 years after this controversial test concluded. Guys, thanks a ton for watching this video with me. I really enjoyed making it. In case you can't tell, I love digging into these stupid tests and reports. Thanks as usual to our sponsors, Top Gun Supply and Ventura Munitions, who provided all of the ammo that we used in this video. And of course, thank you to our supporters on Subscribestar and Utreon. Guys, if you want to win a free gun, we give away 4 guns every single month on Subscribestar and Utreon. Check the description or this link below to see the details on that. All you have to do is sign up at the $5 level or higher on Subscribestar or Utreon, and you're automatically entered. Nothing else you need to do to win one of 4 guns every single month. But thanks again just for watching. Take care.